We don't think of our brains at all, but when our brains are neglected, it has a dramatic impact on everything from the decisions you make to the way you prioritize your time to also how you feel emotionally to how you handle stress. And it turns into this downward spiral that gets increasingly intense over time. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm glad you found the show. This is Love, Happiness, and Success. I am Dr. Lisa Marie Bobby. My background, I'm a marriage and family therapist, a psychologist, and a board certified coach. And I'm here with you every single week talking about all kinds of different dimensions of life that support your ability to feel good about yourself and your life, have better relationships, and get where you want to go. I'm so excited to be talking to Dr. Fotuhi today. Dr. Majid Fotuhi is a neurologist. He's a Harvard-educated physician who has spent his entire career researching brain health, teaching about it at Johns Hopkins University. He has such deep insight into our brains and how to take care of them in such a way that turns everything we do into this upward spiral that feels easy, positive, flexible, hopeful, what we all want. And he's here today to share his advice with you. Welcome, Dr. Fotuhi. I'm just so excited to talk with you and about your new book, The Invincible Brain, where you do a deep dive into everything that I'm sharing.
My pleasure, Lisa. Thanks for inviting me.
So I'm wondering if we could begin with something that I'm always so curious about. When I talk to somebody like you who has devoted so much of your life, I mean, professionally, probably personally too, with such a deep devotion to one particular area of expertise. I'm always so curious to hear just like origin stories. So where did this start for you? Like, why brain health?
Your brain is the most important organ you have. Your brain makes you who you are. Your brain is the organ that makes you feel happy or sad. Yet it can change. So I'm interested in how we can modify our brain so it can perform better, and how we can work with different properties of our brain to have peak brain performance, but also be able to enjoy life and sleep better and have a better quality of life.
Yeah. Well, take us into this more deeply. I mean, you've done so much with this research, teaching. So tell us two stories. Tell us a story of what happens when someone takes this seriously and begins thinking about their brain and what it does and how it works and how to make it better, right? And goes down this path versus tell us a story of what happens when someone just glides along through their lives without even realizing that this is a thing that should be on their radar. What do those outcomes look like?
I think a simple way to look at it is a car. If you buy a car and drive it, when it's new, it functions well, it go around. But if you never maintain it, if you never change the tire, never change the oil, never do maintenance, it gradually falls apart. And after a few years, you you see problems. And if you don't attend to those problems, then those problems create new problems, and then things fall apart. If you take care of your brain at each stage of your life, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and beyond, you build a brain that functions at its peak. And it gives you the satisfaction that you can do well at your job, in your personal relationships, in your experience of life. You enjoy your everyday life better when you are in zone, when you are just right. You know yourself when you're in that zone where you feel good, life is good, you're sleeping well, you're satisfied with the environment you've created for yourself. You're satisfied with the projects you're working on. You're satisfied with the results of the projects. That's a great place to be. I think people need to pause and appreciate that it was their brain that created that environment. You had many choices for different jobs, and you picked the job that you picked. You had different areas that you could study, and this is the area that you decided to study. You had many choices in partnerships, and this is the partner that you have decided to have or decided not to have a partner. So your experiences of life depend on your brain. And if you want to have the best quality of life in personal life, professional life, you want to have the best the best brain to begin with. You want to have the best operator in place. And so if you go that route to say, okay, what are the things I can do to maintain my brain and make it function better and see how it goes? Versus if most people don't appreciate what I just told you, most people are just worried about their mortgage, worried about taking care of their kids, worried about keeping up with their jobs. They just do things. They're reacting to the environment and just do things in a reactive mode. And they never stop and pause that the life they've created is a manifestation of their brain functions. And they could have such a better life if they had a healthier brain. And if they have better insight into the operator and what makes them happy. A simple things to appreciate is to realize what makes you happy. Money makes a lot of people happy, but not everybody is the happiest once they have the money. What is it that gives you joy? We are all wired in a certain way. Our brains are wired with certain talents, with certain choices. Some people love music. Some people kind of like music, but they don't say love it. Some people love to mingle with others. Other people, they don't mind socializing, but they prefer to sit home and listen to music. And so if you have insight in what kind of brain you have, then you create the environment that puts you in the best situation possible. So, I think it's important you pointed out that you do have different choices, a choice of just live life without appreciating what's creating the world for you. And one is to be mindful of the brain that you have and how you can optimize it so that it will function well and it will make you feel good.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I think 9 out of 10 dentists would agree that most people do not think about their brains at all. We think about all kinds of other things. And so give us an example of what someone would be experiencing if they actually have been neglecting their brain and need to start thinking about their brain. Like, take us into the internal experience. What does it feel like to be a person with a brain that's maybe starting to slip a little bit?
I'm just going to be that person for you.
Let's do. I'm probably that person as well.
Okay.
So
I'm
let's
so
go.
tired. I'm just fed up with everything. What is life always full of problems? Why don't people do what they're supposed to do? Is it so complicated? Just do your damn job. What's the problem with you? And my spouse, she always complains. Why don't you just why don't you just appreciate the life you have? Why do I do all the job and you just complain? And my kids, these days, kids are useless. They just do everything. They expect everything. I'm tired of it. I'm just tired of it. I wish these people would do their jobs and have the sense that what needs to be done. And I can't sleep, damn it. Why can't I sleep? I do everything. I'm so tired. I go to bed. I either don't fall asleep or I wake up in the middle of the night. I'm so frustrated. Why can't I sleep? I mean, I do what I'm supposed to do. It's true. I don't have time to exercise. I gather it's good for you. I'm supposed to eat good food, but who has time to cook? I'm just tired. I'm just fed up, tired.
All right. So, you need to stop following me around, first of all, because that was just kind of creepy, but, not quite that bad, but you're saying that so somebody who's like not really paying attention to their brain, their internal experience, they're feeling irritable, kind of like they're being victimized by other people. They kind of know that they probably should be exercising or eating differently, but feel overwhelmed, overworked. I don't have time, blah, and just this like frustration. Is that it?
Yeah, a brain fog.
People and not sleeping. Frustrated about that too.
Brain fog. They just feel like, things are not coming as used to, when you're in college, when in high school, they just learn everything like this. But now they had a meeting, we talked about something, and it just went one ear, came out the other. It's like, did we really talk about that? I don't remember we talking about that meeting. And of course, there are, these days there are notes and there are, evidence that yes, we did talk about that. And they say, damn it, I'm getting older. What is this about getting older? I'm only 25. Why am I acting like a 45-year-old? And so brain fog is the most common symptom of people who don't maintain their brain well. And a general frustration with life in general. They're not on top of the world's on top of them. They're just always keeping their head above the water. They're just always doing things to keep up. They need to hit the pause button and just say, okay, I'm taking on more than I can handle. And so what things I need to eliminate from my world so that I have some time for myself, for my family, and some downtime where I do nothing. I go for a walk in a park. I, do some volunteering work. I do nothing, just sit down, do nothing. One problem with our lifestyle in this part of the world is that everybody's busy. And so when people tell me they're so busy, I have very little sympathy for them. I have very little sympathy.
What comes up for you? Like in your mind, maybe you don't say it out loud, but what are you really thinking privately?
I think, well, you failed to manage your time well, haven't you? You have failed. Don't expect sympathy for me. Don't expect me to say, oh, I'm so sorry, because you have failed. And not consciously. I mean, so many people in our society feel the same way. These days, families with young children are taking the kids to like 4 or 5 different classes. They're trying to take care of their parents who are getting older. They take care of financial things, and they have to be able to sometimes work a little more, sometimes work on weekends to be able to keep up with their financial responsibilities. So there's a lot going on. However, there are also other people who seem to be just fine. You ask them how you doing, they're happy. They may not be as rich as other people.
And you're saying that has a lot to do with the state of their brain health, and that is what you're saying, that people whose brains are working a little bit better might be less impulsive about adding more things to their plate, or maybe more discerning about what they are signing on for. And that brain health is also contributing to that feeling of being frazzled and have too much and never have enough time.
Correct. The frontal lobe is a part of the brain that makes you be able to make decisions. Your frontal lobe determines your motivation. Your frontal lobe really runs the brain. The frontal lobe is the engine, the operator for the rest of the brain, like the learning part of the brain, the choices you make. And frontal lobe is the brain, and brain is made up of cells. And cells have some basic needs. They need oxygen, nutrients, energy, a clean environment. When people are stressed too much or they have poor sleep, the natural cleaning and rinsing that happens at night is interrupted. And so your brain is not getting rinsed regularly, because instead of sleeping 7 to 8 hours, you're sleeping 3 to 4 hours and your sleep is fragmented. So when you wake up in the morning, your brain is still dusty. And I don't want to use the word dirty, but it's not clean. It's not fresh. Those metabolic byproducts of chemical processes have stayed in the brain. Think of like Manhattan when the garbage collection is interrupted. Imagine if for 1 week there's no garbage collection in Manhattan. I mean, the rinsing and cleaning that happens every night is not a passive process. It's an essential, important part of your brain health. And if your brain is not healthy and clean, then the cells have to work in a dirty environment. There's like a lot of junk floating around these brain cells. The brain cells are very finicky. They're very delicate. They can't tolerate too many bad things around them. And when these things accumulate over time, they feel, choked, because they need to have everything to be perfect in order to function well. And when there's a lot of junk accumulated in their environment, and this the other supporting cells that need to take care of them, and the supporting cells are not being able to do things, these metabolic byproducts accumulate over time and impacts their function. So instead of doing 1,000 per second firing, they do 25 per second, or they do a lot less than they would otherwise. An important signal about the brain is not how the frequency is it's like a Morse code. The code, the pattern determines the language of the brain cells. And so the code gets mixed up. And as a result, you feel frazzled. You get frustrated in getting things done because you can't get the app going. You can't sign in, sign out. You can't, like, damn it, where is this? You don't see that little box in the corner that says agree, or, or you get into car accidents, or you get into arguments with, coworkers. So a brain that's healthy, the cells are functioning well, the frontal lobe is in charge. So the frontal lobe says, exercising is a no-brainer. Nobody has said exercise is bad for you. So I must exercise at least 3 hours a week. Everywhere people are talking about the magic of exercise. So when is the time I have to exercise? You can't say I'm busy, because exercise is an essential part of maintenance. It's like oil change. You can't say, well, I'm not going to change the oil in my car. You must do it. You must do it. And so say, I have to meet such and such. Well, instead of meeting them for coffee, let's ask them if they want to go for a walk and talk. So you do a walking meeting instead of sitting at a dinner and talk. We become creative. We think outside the box. The number one thing you need to consider is that if your environment and your life is not tip-top shape, you need to go back to the operating system and, like there's your computer. And let's say you've done so many computer, and every once in a while you have to go and sort of clean it up. A lot of things are running in the background that you need to stop a lot of apps that are running in the background. They're slowing down. Yeah, close those tabs. Which one of them are necessary? Because those tabs are slowing down your computer. So close those tabs. And you need to take the time to do that. So I think it's helpful for people to give themselves a few hours and go sit somewhere and ask themselves, okay, there are 5 pillars of brain health. There are things that everybody knows are good for you. I mean, I put them in 5 pillars of brain health, but everybody knows the good lifestyle habits. Nobody says, oh, sleep, don't worry about sleep. Nobody says that. Everybody says sleep is important. I mean, it must be important because not a single person says otherwise. There's, people argue over what supplement is good for you, but nobody argues that, listen, you need to exercise, you need to eat healthy, and you need to sleep well. Those are the core elements that every person says. And so if I'm not doing it, why am I not doing it? And appreciate it's the brain that's in charge, and how am I going to make brain healthier?
Yeah. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that having a healthy brain leads you to make better, like literally prioritize how you're living. It's sort of like this upward spiral. If your brain is working well, you're like getting it. It's clicking. Exercise is actually non-negotiable. I need to sleep. And then you are organizing your life around those things, which then supports everything getting better. Whereas if your brain isn't working very well, it's easy to talk yourself into believing all kinds of weird stuff that isn't true, that turns into this downward spiral because you're not prioritizing your life around the things that you know matter. So that in itself is a manifestation of this.
In my lectures, I have one slide that summarizes what you just said, which is I showed a simple slide. On one side, there is a brain, and the other side is the heart. There's an arrow that goes from the brain to the heart, and there's an arrow that goes from the heart to the brain. And what I talk about is if your brain is healthy, you do all the things that keeps your body and your heart healthy. So, for example, you exercise. Once your brain makes decisions that are good for your heart, you exercise, you eat right, you sleep well as much as possible. But when the heart is healthier, it gives more blood to the brain. When brain has optimal blood flow, it functions better. And when it functions better, it makes better decisions. So you now have better decisions on how to optimize your lifestyle choices to not only exercise more and keep your heart healthy, but also to make decisions about which house to buy, who to hang out with, how to spend your hours. If somebody doesn't take care of themselves, they spend a lot of time on social media. That's a brain decision. You spend 3 hours, 4 hours on your social media, and you gain so little other than the fact that you got tired just sitting there. That's a decision that your brain made that decision. If your brain is healthy and vibrant, you make much better decisions. So the cycle continues that you may have a good heart, your brain, you could make decisions for your heart and for your environment, which then, supports you. And then the better environment in the heart then makes your brain healthier. And if your brain is healthy, and so it's a positive feedback where you just make better decisions. Your brain is healthier. You eat better, you sleep better, you laugh more, you stress less.
Like it's just easier to do the right thing. Well, and as you're talking, what's coming up for me is how vulnerable I think we are, and maybe more so if our brains aren't working that well, because you've probably encountered this as well, but I came across some research not too long ago that people who are heavy users of AI, and especially if they are offloading some of the cognitive work that they used to do, making decisions, writing things, understanding stuff, they actually begin to have differences in their like the thickness of certain areas of their brain. And we also know that these algorithms and the things that are being put in front of us are often done so with emotionally charged imagery or hooky headlines, kinds of things that keep us there. And so that there's this vortex that starts to happen as our brains are atrophying. We become more and more vulnerable to the emotional manipulations of whatever people want us to keep looking at. And it's like harder and harder to say, put the phone down, back away slowly, go do something more healthy for your life, yourself, your relationships. That there's a relationship here that tends to
a simple
sustain.
example is when you use a GPS. When you get used to using GPS, then even a place that you've gone 50 times, every time you use the GPS, in the old days, you went somewhere 3 times and you would figure it out. But figuring out where you're going is a brain function. It's challenging the part of the brain called cortex. See, there's a layer of the brain on top that's like a blanket that covers the rest of the brain. And this blanket is layers of cells. And so this complex mosaic of brain areas form covering of the brain. And there's an area called hippocampus, which is the size of your thumb, one on the right, one on the left. And so the cortex and hippocampus are in charge of your cognitive functions: reading, writing, typing, navigating, doing your taxes, do whatever else you do. These higher brain functions emanate from activity of networks of connections in the cortex and hippocampus. When you use your brain and challenge your brain, you're expanding areas of cortex and hippocampus, and you're making your brain healthier and stronger. It's like when you go to the gym and you do, push-ups and pull-ups and you do weights. You challenge the muscles and they grow. You challenge the cortex and hippocampus and they grow. In fact, I wrote in my book, practice makes cortex. When you practice something, cortex becomes thicker. Now, the opposite applies. When you don't use your brain, when you use a GPS all the time, then a part of the cortex and hippocampus for navigation shrinks, becomes thinner. And, not only it didn't expand, it actually atrophied. Same goes with AI. When, you use your AI to solve everything for you, including writing email, you start losing your capacity to write emails because, the chat writes a better email for you and you use your confidence that, hey, I can actually do these things myself. I think it's best to use AI for things that you would give to an assistant to do. Like in my work, when I find an article, I say, can you go find this article for me? I would assign people to do things for me. And now I find that chat or other forms of AI are my assistants. I use it as an assistant to get me things. And I also continue to challenge my brain. So it's okay to use AI. I'm not saying don't use AI. It's very helpful, and it's a way of life. But it should not be the case that you never do anything on your own. You should continue to challenge your brain in the ways you enjoy. If you like music, dancing, a new language, challenge your brain. Ultimately, if you don't use your brain, then it becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it at all, it atrophies. And your brain is the same thing. It thrives on growth. Your brain likes challenges. And when it's not challenged, it atrophies, just like a muscle.
This is so interesting. So, okay, one of my very favorite things about having the privilege of doing this podcast is that I have the opportunity to talk to very smart and interesting people such as yourself, and almost like kind of a stand-in for other people listening to this conversation who probably have a lot of the same stuff that I do, right? I mean, I'm a psychologist, but I'm on my own journey as well. And so I always like the opportunity to pose different things to my expert guests, just using examples from my own life, because I think a lot of people listening to this can relate. So, for example, I mean, one thing I personally, ever since early childhood, and I have a strong family history of ADHD, is part of my life experience. And I know from my own experience that sometimes this is better for me and sometimes this is worse for me. And one of the things that I'm hearing more and more about in the zeitgeist lately are people wondering if they themselves have ADHD. And it's because of noticing lapses, having trouble prioritizing things, maybe dealing with impulsivity, difficulty organizing themselves or getting things done. And so I would be so curious to hear your perspective about what is going on when people begin to feel worse. I mean, you certainly talked about needing to sleep. It cleans your brain. But I guess my real question, your opinions about some of the prevalence of people experiencing themselves as having ADHD related to the fact that maybe as a culture, as a society, it's less about a genetic predisposition to ADHD and more about neglect of our hardware, right? The operating system. And we're experiencing the consequences of that.
I agree. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say a person has obstructive sleep apnea. They snore at night and they feel tired during the day. And, the family members have pointed out that, hey, you're snoring and you stop breathing at night and this is not good. But, a person who snores doesn't have time to go see a doctor, a sleep doctor, get a sleep study. And they're not bothered because they're asleep. They're not bothered by the fact that the whole house is rattling or they're sleeping. They're just sleeping. In fact, they're not sleeping. They're like, stop breathing 100, 200 times in a few hours, and that's bad for them. And then in the morning, they're tired. And they come to me as a memory brain expert, and they say, I have ADHD. I can't pay attention to anything. I keep procrastinating things. I have ADHD. And they want me to give them some Adderall. That's the problem. They don't have ADHD. They have a health condition that has affected their ability to function. Their attention is poor. They have deficit in attention, but it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of lack of sleep. It came out of their sleep apnea affecting their brain. Same applies to people who are stressed out and don't get enough sleep. People who sleep fewer than at least 6 hours a night tend to be irritable and they may have difficulty focusing attention and pay attention to things. And so it takes longer for them to do things, or they're impatient. They want things to be done quickly. And so they get frustrated because it doesn't happen. And as a result, they may postpone it or procrastinate. Also, I must say that the way the social media has surrounded us with everything being so quick, our attention span is shorter than it used to be a generation ago. A combination of these affects the people's ability to maintain their attention. In my experience as a neurologist who's seen thousands of patients with ADHD, I would think 80% of them had issues in life that contributed their attention. And only a small percentage of people have really ADHD out of nowhere. Like, it is what it is. Their family members have it. They honestly, sincerely are trying to not procrastinate. They genuinely are doing everything to maintain their attention. It's just difficult. And even those people who have this, what I call pure ADHD, would benefit from things like exercise, optimizing sleep, eating well. No, they may need some medications too. I'm not against medications. I did prescribe a lot of Adderall myself, but it was always in the context of life coaching. Have someone help you with organizing things, set reminders, set rewards for yourself. There are a lot of natural, healthy things that people can do to improve their attention, and medications can help too. But the other 80% who have attention problems and they think they have ADHD, they really need to appreciate how the brain is responsible for the performance they're seeing. The brain determines their peak performance. If their brain is not functioning well, they're low in how well they're not only performing at a job or doing tasks, but how they're experiencing life. You want to be a well-oiled machine. You want to be in that zone where you're happy, you have the best environment, that you like your job or your studies. You want to be in that zone where you're there. That's it. You're in the state of flow. State of flow means you're in parallel, your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, everything's lined up. You're in a state of flow. And so you have to figure out how to get there and stay there. And then ideally go through life like that. Like, if you're in the state of flow and you're traffic stuck, you're not going to yell and scream. You're going to say, hey, I've been wanting to listen to this podcast and here's my opportunity. I've been wanting to call this person. Here's my opportunity. As opposed to honking horn and they say, damn it, what is this? Why don't, blame the world for your problems.
Okay. So there's more of flexibility in there and the opportunity to notice something that would maintain that equilibrium and really the flow experience you're describing. That is what people want. But I think that this is really a new way of thinking about it in some ways, because I think that, it's very easy to look for other reasons. And I think that something I've been increasingly aware of over the last couple of years probably is the way that my own profession and industry is contributing to this. So I'm a psychologist, and I think that there has been in some ways, fantastic increased appreciation for mental health and the impact of life experiences and our internal state on things like our mood, how we feel, how we function. But I think I've also been concerned about this tendency to attribute so many things to some type of psychological or emotional problem. Like if you're not making good choices, it's about your self-esteem or unprocessed trauma or all kinds of things. Sometimes that can be true, but I think that there has been a general neglect of the power and reality of biologically based systems to really have a lot more influence in how we think and feel and behave than is maybe sexy to talk about in our culture right now. And so I would also love to hear your thoughts and opinions about how the way we feel emotionally is impacted by brain health and some of the changes that you've seen in some of your clients or patients when they stop, talking to a therapist for week after week about how much they hate their father and instead start taking their brain health more seriously as like, maybe this is the primary problem, actually. What do you see?
I think I agree with you in that we need to make brain health a priority and realize that when your brain functions well, a lot of other things fall into place. So if you're exercising, it actually is rewarding in and of itself. When you play a game of tennis or a game of pickleball, or when you go for a run with your friends, or you play, volleyball with your friends, afterwards you're feeling better. There's, nobody argues that after doing sports, you actually feel better. I have heard very few people who feel miserable after exercise. Those who dread going to a gym, obviously, I think they dread going to the gym in the first place. They come out, still feeling frustrated that they didn't want to go in the first place, and they need to find something they like. So that's the solution there. And once you feel better, then you're not going to sit down and dwell on your past, because your brain says, hey, I exercised for an hour. I'm not going to ruin, my health by eating a cookie that's 400 calories, which is almost the same as the 400 calories that I burn, cycling for an hour. I'm not going to eat that cookie. And then, I'm going to go do something else. And sort of it changes the tone and the conversation in your head. People who have a sedentary lifestyle and people who have a limited social interactions are more likely to have these repetitive negative thoughts where they blame their current life based on the experiences they've had in the past and dwell on it. I think it's a horrible thing that people have had, child abuse or have had trauma. I feel for them. However, I think cognitive behavior therapy can really help people like that to forget about the past and move on. And I say that as a neurologist who's been there, done that, not as sort of a person with an opinion on the matter. We, in my neurology practice, treated hundreds, if not thousands of patients over the past 15, 20 years who had similar thoughts about how their past was really affecting their day-to-day life now. And they were not lying, they were affected. However, once you realize that what you describe as a repetitive negative thought is a thought that is going in circles. And when you have a thought that goes in circles, it's like practicing the piano over and over again. It reinforces pathways in the brain. If you play the piano only once, you don't create pathways in the brain. If you play 10 times, you don't. 1,000, you start creating new pathways, actual little ropes that connect point A to point B. So when you practice 1,000 hours of piano, then you start making connections. When you have a repetitive negative thought, every time you're thinking that thought, you're reinforcing that pathway. You're making it thicker. And instead of being a thin rope, it becomes a large rope. And it becomes more difficult to then quit it. But what you want to do is to say, you know what? This is a repetitive negative thought. It's a thought. It's a thing. And just like I worked on it so many years to break it, I can ignore it a little bit every day. And then I can then make it go away. If you play the piano for 10,000 hours and then you don't play it for 20 years and then you want to go play again, you may remember some things, but that huge pathways that was built in your brain is gone. Only a trace of it is left. And this is exactly the same principle. See, repetitive negative thoughts is what I call negative neuroplasticity. The same thing with addiction. When you have addicted to something, you have created new pathways that to reinforce your behavior. It could be addiction to shopping or drugs, to alcohol, smoking, gambling. And so these pathways are formed, but these are malleable. They're not roads made of asphalts. They're pathways made of biological things. And just like they gradually grew, they can gradually dissolve. And so you decide, okay, I have these repetitive negative thoughts. I think about the same thing a million times. It's not healthy. And what I'm going to do that every time that thought comes, I'm going to rub my finger. I'm going to distract myself. Or I'm going to touch my nose. I'm going to distract that thought. I'm going to stop. I'm going to put a block in that thought. Or I'm going to set aside an hour. I'm going to go sit in the chair. I'm going to call it the worry chair. I'm going to sit there. I'm going to sit there for an hour, and I'm going to really think about that negative thought.
I'm going to feel so bad. Yeah.
I'm just going to let it. I'm just going to go all in. Let it ruin my brain. This is your opportunity. Go do it. Go for it. But then every time that thought comes, say, listen, we had that conversation. Right now, I'm going to do a breathing exercise. Or right now, I'm going to do 5 push-ups. Tell yourself that every time a thought comes to your head, you have to do a push-up. Realize that you can undo these bundles. I heard something recently, really loved. The quote was, you have to use the past only to help guide your future, not to dwell on it. And so I actually think that's very thoughtful. That's deep. So I can't think about, I shouldn't have married that person. I should have I should have done this thing. Why did I do this? Why did that person didn't tell me this? Why did they hide that from me? Why did this? Why did that? And dwell on it, spend the present moment thinking about what happened or what did not happen. And now the present moment is not being productive. The present moment is just chewing some old material. And so the attitude should be, okay, what can we learn about this so we can have a better future moving forward, starting now?
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think what is interesting, but also what is hard, is I think that typically the experience of someone who is caught in that type of whirlpool, they believe that it's true. So they don't have that perspective to say, oh, I'm having a repetitive ruminating thought right now. It is, no, this thing really happened and I can't stop thinking about it. Is like they're kind of in the washing machine, you know? And so I think maybe for anybody listening, that's step one, is to start to be a little bit more suspicious of your own thoughts and feelings and entertain this new idea that Dr. Fotuhi is putting in front of you, is that perhaps you can change the way that you think, but you need to get some psychological distance from it first. And so is this where this idea of neuroplasticity comes in? Because I think what I'm hearing you say is that in some ways a symptom of a neglected, abused brain is almost this rigidity. It's a stuckness where maybe what healthy brains look and feel like is more flexibility. Is that true?
Yes, I think that the first step in addressing people who suffer with their repetitive negative thoughts is insight. To say, isn't that interesting? I've been thinking about the same thought 1,000 times today, 1,000 times. And I've been there myself. I know that from experience. It's not like other people do it. I've been there. Like I'm going swimming. While I'm swimming, I spend so much of my time thinking about, damn it, why did that happen? Or damn it, why didn't I do that? Or damn it, why did it happen? And then, well, why didn't I say that? Why did you say that? And then I realized, hey, I'm just having a repetitive negative thoughts. I'm just having another RNT. And maybe
RNT. An RNT.
Yeah.
Repetitive negative thought. I'm writing that down.
Yeah. And then I smile and I say, okay, fine. You catch yourself in the midst of it. Nobody says, I'm going to do some RNTs now. And, you catch yourself having repeated the same thought. And it's amazing to me that it's possible that a person, will do that for years and years. Let me give you an example. I had a patient who was actually 72 years old, and she told me that she had memory problems, which we addressed. As a part of our evaluation, we always, asked about how people felt. What bothering you? Do you have any obsessive thoughts? Do you have anxiety? Do you have fatigue? And throughout my conversation, she said, something bothers me is that 30 years ago, my mom passed away and my father had died already. And we had a house, and my brother manipulated documents so I didn't get my share of inheritance. And I lost $1 million 30 years ago. And if only I had $1 million back then, you know how much richer I would be now? And I hate my brother. He did well. He's now in Florida. He had a house. He has a car. He has a boat. He's living life. And now I have a modest life. And it appeared that this has been a repetitive negative thought for her for all these years. She started doing our program, and we worked with her on her exercise, sleep, and she also worked with our social worker and received some cognitive behavioral therapy, and realizing, making her appreciate that these repetitive negative thoughts have not helped her in the past 30 years. How many hours has she wasted thinking what should have happened? And obviously, there's no benefit in that. And so she had like 8 sessions of CBT with my social worker. And so when she came to see me at the end of her 12-week program, our program was 12 weeks of brain training and brain coaching based on the 5 pillars of brain health, which I'll explain in a minute. So she was happy. Her memory was better. She had more energy. She was exercising more. But she said, Dr. Fotuhi, the best thing about this program I did was to appreciate that I wasted so many years of my life. All that time that I spent in that repetitive is totally time wasted. It's not going to help me in the future. I'm already 72. What's going to help me in the future? And it is what it is. It was an unfortunate thing that happened, but I have a life. I have a place to live. Maybe I would have been richer, but maybe, who knows? Maybe I would have bought an expensive car and would have a car accident. I would be dead. Just because there was extra money, it didn't necessarily mean I would have had a better life. And I have a good life now anyway. So I've decided I'm going to stop thinking about it. And in the past, sessions that I've had, now I think very little about it. And when a thought comes, I say, yeah, it was a bad thing. But, I have more important things to do now to make sure the rest of my life is good. I think it is possible to degrade and dissolve those pathways, even as quickly as 12 weeks. If you have had 30 years to build it, it doesn't take 30 years for it to go away.
Absolutely. And just quick note to anybody listening. So, and Dr. Fotuhi, and I want to hear more about all of this, the 5 pillars of brain health and how they could be applied. But just as a public service announcement, that 10 to 12 week timeline, that is also true for psychotherapy. If therapy is going to work, you are at least starting to experience benefit and a difference in the way that you think, feel, and behave in about 10 to 12 weeks. And I just wanted to say that out loud because I think also people can get involved with therapy that, is not particularly focused, and I think actually supports rumination and entrenchment in these old thoughts as opposed to start getting you out of it and into a better place. And so I just want people to be able to make informed decisions about what they get involved with. So thank you for indulging me there. Okay. So I know I don't have unlimited time with you. I'd love to ask you just 1 or 2 more things. So there is someone within the sound of our voice right now, maybe me, who, might be going down the drain a little bit with regards to brain health, not getting enough sleep, feeling chronically kind of overwhelmed, scattered, too much going on, doesn't have time, knows they should exercise, but isn't doing it, right? And just, hasn't really been taking care of their brain intentionally and is now experiencing that. And so there's that like negative vortex. Maybe they are more frustrated. Maybe they do feel more overwhelmed. So therefore they don't have time to do X, Y, Z. Where would you recommend even starting? Because I think when you're in that place, I can speak from my own experience, it feels so hard. Like everything just feels hard, right? And then you have to put more energy into brain health and like, I don't want to eat a salad. I just want to lay here, like that kind of thing. Where do you start?
I think the first thing to do is to create some space in your schedule.
But but see, my poor adult brain is like impossible.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that again, as a doctor, there are times a patient has a stroke and they go to the hospital and, they felt everything was so critical in their lives. And here they are in a hospital. They've been there like 2 weeks, and life surprisingly went on. The world
Earth
somehow
did not fall into the sun.
So somehow the world did not fall apart that the 2 weeks they were not there. As much as they felt they were center of everything and they're running everything, and if they were not there, there would be catastrophe. Their absence somehow did not feel as dramatic as they had assumed. The thing to do is this: if you go to your daily responsibilities and the things you do every day, and then put from everything from 1 to 10 as how critical it is for you. For example, if you have a 9 to 5 job, obviously that's unnegotiable. You have to go. But can you work 4 days a week? And you can't always say, well, we need the money. Obviously, if you're not in the happy place, if you're not in that flow zone, if you're not enjoying your life, the extra money is not going to help. Going on a vacation for 4 days or a week or 2 weeks is not going to change your experience of the whole year. So the $5,000-$10,000 that you get for that vacation is really better not to earn it than not to go on vacation. Because if you're stressed out all the time to make that extra money, it's not worth it. So then anything that had score of less than 3 needs to be eliminated. And a typical example I see in young couples is the kids are going to like 4 different classes. A kid come from piano lessons to baseball, and then they go to drawing lessons, and on weekends they have this. And the parents, I'm one of them. My kids are in college now, but I was one of them. My wife and I were just drivers. We were just constantly rushing from work to home to eat quickly and to take this kid to this activity, this kid to that activity. And you know what? If I were to do it again, I would have cut it in half. The kid doesn't need to go every class every night. It's okay. Their brain will be fine. Because I need the brain. If you had someone who was a full-time, job of taking care of the kids, yes. But you need to take care of yourself as much as you take care of your kid. And if the kid doesn't take piano lessons, it's not like the future will be ruined. They'll be fine. So that's one example of things that people can reduce. So make some time where you have less things to do.
Get off the hamster wheel is step 1. Why is that so important? I'm surprised. Like, that is step 1. I thought you were going to say something about like eating differently or exercising, but like you go to just like giving yourself some space first of all.
Yes, because I think you need about an hour a day, maximum, an hour a day for self-maintenance. Because most things in the 5 pillars of brain health are exercise, sleep, diet, stress reduction, brain training. Except the exception of brain training, all 4 things are good for your heart. They're good for your skin. They're good for your hair. They're good for your muscle. They're good for your sex life. All those things are good for you on all different levels. So it's not just you're doing things for your brain. So you need to take some time off from your current responsibilities. You don't want to add to an already overflowing schedule. You don't want to add one more source of stress. Now, you were supposed to do something and now you go to a gym for an hour, which then pushes everything else. You need to delete, click the delete button and free yourself and realize what are the consequences, and don't make everything like the world will fall apart. Most things are not as a big deal.
Yeah. And maybe even believing that is a manifestation of a brain that isn't working that well. Like, no, seriously. Cause like I can totally do that. Trick yourself into believing it, like add one more thing to your plate. And then it turns into the spiral where you're overwhelmed and stressed out and you can't sleep. And so then you drink wine and then that makes it worse. Right. And that's, because I think a lot of people do that, right? They start not feeling well. Things aren't going well. They don't feel good. And then they tend to like try to self-medicate in some ways with things that are going to impair their brain further. Cannabis. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. You don't want temporary solutions. It's okay to have a glass of wine or, do cannabis once in a while, once a month or once in a thing. But I think it's better to hit the pause button and go for a walk, go for a hike, remove yourself from a cell phone, other people disrupting you, go to a sauna, go somewhere where other people don't bother you, and then make a list of priorities, determine the things that are, one of the things important is having a sense of purpose in life, deciding what you want to do with your life, what's important for you, what's meaning for you, and then eliminate things that are not in line directly with your purpose. You can't do everything. So you set priorities and realize, like, my kids are the most important thing. So, okay, fine. So then, don't accept to be the vice president of this, homeowner association. You don't need to be there. You don't need to add more to your plate. It's nice to be there, but, your kids are priority. But then if say my network is important, my kids are fine, they're not going to die, then fine. The kids are not going to go to 5 clubs. I'm going to go to the homeowner association and become the president. Decide what's important, and things that are not important, eliminate, delete. Create space for yourself. And I think this is a very common problem in our society. We all are running at max periods. We're always late for the next thing we're supposed to do. And that doesn't help. And that doesn't give us a good sense of enjoyment of life. Because if you're always trying to just keep up, you're not enjoying yourself.
No. But okay, hold on. How bad is stress for your brain really? Like if somebody's always like, going through their day, always feeling behind, what does that actually start to do to you cognitively?
It's horrible. Horrible. When you stress out, you increase cortisol levels. Cortisol is the stress hormone. And you can think of cortisol as poison for the brain. The part of the brain for the hippocampus is really sensitive to cortisol, more so than other parts of the brain. So when the cortisol levels are higher, the hippocampus shrinks more than other parts of the brain. The higher levels of stress, the smaller size of the hippocampus, linearly. So it's okay to have a little stress when you have to catch a flight, or you're late for something, or something bad has happened, or you lost a job, or something is like a real stress. There's a leak in the basement. Those are the things we're supposed to stress, and it's fine. Occasional periods of stress are inevitable, and our physiology is built in a way to deal with it. We get increased heart rate, we get increased blood pressure. Our system can handle it. The problem is when people make everything an emergency, like the countertop is dirty, emergency, clean it. We have to go. We have an appointment at 8. It's an emergency. Let's get ready. It's emergency. Kid didn't do homework. Why don't you do homework? It's emergency. It's emergency. No, you just leave things for emergency. The kid doesn't do his homework. Fine. Let's figure out a way to do that. And if he doesn't do his homework, it's okay. It's okay. And life will go on. Not everybody who doesn't do homework ends up a homeless person, And we need to realize that not everything is an emergency. And I think when you have time to go exercise, like, this is what I do. When I do like a biking for an hour or two, I let those things digest, it's my downtime. I ruminate on what's going on in my life and what's going on. And I have some thoughts about, oh, this is good. And everything falls into place. So I think, this is step number 1 is create some space. Step number 2 is manage stress. And then, work on the 5 pillars of brain health.
Yeah, totally. Well, no, and then because it's just so good to hear you say that so clearly. Like if you are constantly simmering in a broth of cortisol, you are actually poisoning your brain. You're making your hippocampus smaller, and you will therefore make poorer choices and feel more stressed out. Like there's this self-perpetuating feedback loop, right? And so step 1 is like calm down, make space, stop tricking yourself into believing that everything is so important, because that in itself might be a function of a brain that isn't working very well, and just like calm the heck down, because then you can have more space and bandwidth for the other things you can build in that I heard you talk about over our time together today: exercise, nutrition, relationships. You did mention brain training. We haven't talked about that, but I'm assuming that is related to little puzzles and apps, that the friction that we were talking about previously, starting to build some of that back in intentionally, as opposed to outsourcing all your thinking to Claude.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh my goodness. This has been so illuminating. Is there any one last idea you'd like to share with our listeners who've been listening to this and they're like, oh man, I'm in trouble?
I think we have to appreciate that our brain has a high degree of malleability and that it can change for the better at any age, at any time, and make that a priority to take care of our brain like you would take care of a car or a garden. Be conscious of taking care of your brain the same way you do a specific thing to take care of your teeth. Your brain needs maintenance. And so make a little short list of the 5 pillars of brain health we talked about, and then make it, don't make it another source of response and a source of anxiety. But, put everything in the bucket every day and be happy. I think ultimately we want to enjoy our day-to-day life. And if you're not enjoying it, it's your problem. Don't blame the world. If things are not going your way, you can blame the whole world. And, if that gives you any satisfaction, but ultimately the world you created around you, in the most part, has to do with decisions you made. You married the person you married. You decide to have kids versus no kids. So it's your doing. You're responsible. And don't just blame the whole world and feel sorry for yourself. Own your problems, set a plan, and handle it.
I hear that. Well, and I think that it is also true that people live through legitimately hard things that really weren't their fault, and now they're left holding the bag of the consequence. But even though, that might be bracing for some people to hear, I think there's also the core of empowerment, right? Because what you're saying is that you have agency, you have control over the way that you feel, even if sometimes you don't know that you do. And I think that's my big takeaway from the conversation, is that, you just opened up a whole new door for people to be exploring, a new lever to pull, that if you're not feeling good, if you're not having a good time, if you'd like to do things differently, start paying more attention to the health of your brain. So what a nice place to land. And you guys listening to this, I hope that this conversation was as fascinating for you as it was for me. And there's more where that came from. Again, my guest today has been Dr. Majid Fotuhi, and the book is called The Invincible Brain. Now, Dr. Fotuhi, before we let you go, where would people connect with you to find out more about you, your book, there's a program apparently, how do we get in on this?
Yes, I have an Instagram page and also LinkedIn. I have a website, drfotuhi.com. And I'm making an app for my book, The Invincible Brain. So if you just Google The Invincible Brain, I think a lot of resources become available that people can use.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was a pleasure. Fascinating conversation.
Yes, I enjoyed talking to you.
What a fascinating conversation. I think Dr. Fotuhi had such an interesting perspective. And I love the core message. I know that he said this in a very blunt way, but I think that the headline here is that we're empowered, we have control. And really, even Louise Hay said this: everything in your life is a manifestation of what you are believing, what you are thinking, what you are telling yourself, and what you're doing. And if you don't like the results you get, you could do something different. And that oftentimes begins with the way our brains are working. When we put energy into this, it makes a lot of other things easier downstream. And so these are new ideas for us, particularly in our culture today, which I think wants to emphasize the emotional aspects or the mental health component, but these are all related. So one of the things that was coming up for me as Dr. Fotuhi was talking is how challenging sometimes it is to just do these things. And in my experience, and certainly is true in my own life, I think we all could use some support getting insight, creating some psychological distance, being supported in getting back into contact with our own agency and empowerment. And here's the hardest part for me, certainly, maybe for you too, is even when we know that we should be doing things differently, sometimes it's hard to follow through. We can fall into those old stories we tell ourselves about, what is air quote true, and fall back into those own old patterns. And I think that is a moment when having the support of somebody outside of yourself can be a real game changer. Somebody who can help you get visibility and distance, but also provide accountability, motivation, and structure for starting to do things differently. And that is where coaching comes in. I have an interesting opportunity if you've been thinking about getting involved in some personal development work, such as coaching, which is different from therapy, by the way. Therapy seeks to treat. It is diagnosis and treatment for clinical mental health conditions. And if that is what is going on, by all means, do therapy. But if you think you'd get more out of support for doing what you know you need to do to feel better and that it's been hard, coaching is really the way to go. It kind of cuts through the fluff and focuses on who you are, what you want, and how to make things happen in your own life. Now, if you've listened to this show before, you might already know this, but if you haven't, I'll just share that part of what I do professionally, I'm a clinical supervisor of other therapists, but more recently, I have begun helping therapists become educated in the field of coaching psychology, because that is not something that therapists learn how to do. I didn't learn how to do this until about 10 years ago. I actually went back to school and became a board certified coach. And now I teach other therapists how to practice coaching effectively, ethically, and with excellence. As part of my coach training program, I am putting my therapists, who are very experienced, licensed therapists, by the way, but I'm putting them through an 8-week practicum, where they have the opportunity to work with coaching clients on a limited basis. They get to practice the skills and competencies that they're learning about, but it also opens up a unheard of opportunity for people, perhaps you, to work with one of these therapists learning coaching for a deeply discounted rate. At the time of this recording, it is only $49 a session to work with one of our coaching students. And again, this is a unicorn situation, you guys. A fully licensed therapist with tons of experience and coaching competencies layered on top of this turns the whole thing into rocket fuel. And it is a amazing opportunity in terms of the cost. We're just barely covering our expenses with this. It's not a mercenary endeavor. It is a win-win for everyone. So if this sounds good to you, you would like to get in on this action and get some support for yourself in a really attainable way, you're invited. Come to growingself.com/grow to learn more about it. We have a quick little application for you to fill out just to make sure that you would be that this program would be a genuinely good fit for you. And if so, then you'll get access to get connected with one of our students for 8 sessions of coaching. Come on over, growingself.com/grow. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And I will be back in touch with you very soon for another episode of Love, Happiness, and Success.